just some, well, firstly, hello. You need to say hello. Go on.
Thank you all for coming. I'm very, very touched and very honored and very delighted to see so many of you. And some of you have come from Switzerland and Norway and Sweden and Germany and God, what else? I don't even remember now. Ireland. We're not going to forget anybody.
And London, yes, exactly. That takes nearly as long, yeah.
It's an hour again.
Yeah. So thank you all for coming. We're very touched. And we hope you get a lot out of the day. This is a very important and what I call a landmark day for this system, because the work was started in 1995, and it evolved from bioluminetics into supercoherence in 2009, when the supercoherence SRTLFs came into form. And that was a landmark for us, because it put the system onto another level. And this is another landmark, and you will see why at the end of the session. So this is the introduction and the launch of the new frequency. We haven't had a new frequency launch since a couple of years, I think, at least. I don't remember exactly when. I'm not good with dates. But this one is a very special one, and you will see why for many reasons. Because water is, at the moment, a very hot topic. There are several conferences on the new science of water. And what scientists are finding is that what we know is a drop and what we don't know is an ocean. So these are some, what you will see today is new, and you will see why, and what we expect this frequency to do. So this is a new adventure. The things happen for me. I don't kind of plan them. And in the August of last year, that is in 2017, I have some very lovely friends in Austria who also have a place in Spain, in Cuenca. And his name is Georg Gaup-Berghausen, and his wife Rie, and they're very darling people. And I had seen some beautiful images with Georg, and I'd been fascinated with them. They were very extraordinary images, and they were of water. I'd never seen anything like that. They were not like Masaru Emoto or anything like that. They were just completely riveting. And at one point I was curious. I said, what would the RTLFs show anything? Because for me, VRIC has been the gold standard. I've never really explored any other means of seeing what the RTLFs do. So I'd never explored any other way. But Georg sent me an invitation. He says, why don't you come to Cuenca? We have a lab there with William Hofer, who's in Germany, and he has a lab there for 15 years doing this work. So if you come, we can do some imaging. I said, I'll come only if you can do the imaging, not otherwise. So we agreed, and that was a trip to Cuenca. And it was a very magical trip. May didn't want to come initially, and then she absolutely loved it. I have to tell you that.
That's true.
So that is Dr. Wilhelm Hofer, this is Georg, and this is Rie, and this is Thrity. So this is really an entry into another world. We call it Spagyric imaging, and he calls it Spagyric Crystal Analysis. And it's really an introduction to another world, which you normally would not see even under a microscope. It's a strange word. It comes from a combination of separation and unity. And the original process was developed by Paracelsus in the 1600s, which allows us access to a different level of reality, which is only visible to us now with the aid of modern technology. So yes, it is under a microscope, but it is not just water put under a microscope. It's water which has gone through a process and then put under a microscope. So when Georg describes it, he says it's the etheric level which showing. I don't know how to describe it, but you will see the images and they will speak their own truth. So these are some of the images. So we took what we did was we did it in 3 steps. So we took a drop of the ordinary tap water from Cuenca, which is very hard water. And then it went through this process, which we are not going to describe because it's very detailed and complicated, and it will just be boring. But what we wanted to see was what the effects the RTLFs would have on the water. So we took the female frequency and put it in the water, in the tap water, and then it went through the Spagyric process, and then you got the image. Then we did the same thing with the male frequency, and then we did the same thing with putting all the frequencies together. So you will see this is the baseline, the drop of Cuenca tap water that has been through the process. And you can see that it doesn't look organized. It's kind of random. This is the female frequency. Now you can see it's starting to change and it's getting very defined. This is another image. There are the many faces of water. And this is the male frequency, how different it is. It's the same male frequency. There were several, we took dozens and dozens of shots. We've only shown a few here. And this is the two together, which is very exquisite with these little plant-like forms and stuff like that. So you can see the water transforming just with the power of frequency. Because the supercoherence frequencies, as you know, do not contain anything physical. They only contain a frequency, which is information. Information is invisible and is not available to the 5 senses. This is on a higher magnification, so you can see the different. He calls it crystals and flowers, but anyway, that's just what you name these things is a different matter from whatever they are. You just see them as they are. Anyway, this was, when I saw these images, I'm one of those who, for me, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I've always been like that. So though I'd kind of seen a lot of other stuff, I had not seen this was very stunning for me. I was like, oh my God, what is this? Wow, wow. And so a new adventure we became involved in that. So water is 75% of the planet's 75 to 90% of the human body. But we don't really pay much attention to it. And this presentation will show you why you need to. Because the water looks the same, the water from here and the water from there and water from everywhere looks the same in a glass of water, it is not the same. And you will see why. And you will see what happens to the water. As Mayor said, Mom, that is, you'll have to reach for your Prozac when you see that part of the presentation, because it's very depressing to see what humans have done to the water on the planet. And what we can do to change this scenario. Think you know that all life forms are mainly water. According to Vladimir Boyakov, he said the jellyfish is 99.9% water. How about that? 0.01% is not water. So this is Kurt Wurthrich, who is the Nobel Prize winner from Switzerland.
Now when you look at organs, say the heart or the lung or muscles or the brain, then all that you can see in a simple NMR experiment is the water in these organs. So water, your head is full of water. There is nothing else but water, almost.
That kind of says it all. So there is the inner water, which is the water that informs your whole system. And then there is the outer water. I think most of you will have known of the work of Masaru Emoto, yes?
Yeah.
So you know that thoughts and emotions affect the water. They affect your inner water and they affect the outer water. So, and we already know the effects of the RTLFs in creating coherence at the level of the emotions and in the biolight field. This you already know. So, as soon as we came back from Cuenca, the first thing that I did was I put the frequencies into the water. Now, I could have done that 10 years ago, but I never did. So, I don't know why I didn't. But those images, as I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So as soon as I saw those stunning images of the water with the SRTLFs, straight came home, put it in my jug, and from that day to now, for my cooking, my drinking, I don't use any other water. And we also informed, we put it on the website under research tag, and we also informed everybody on the list to look at it so that they could do the same if they wished. And then we took another decision because the images are stunningly beautiful. But the question was, what do they really do to the body? Are there any other effects? We wanted to explore. We didn't know anything about it at that time. So I know somebody who's a very, very seasoned live blood analysis practitioner up north in the Lake District. So I thought, we're going to do some live blood analysis and see what happens with the SRTLFs. So it's funny, you kind of know these things for 20 years and you don't do anything about it, and suddenly those few images, and suddenly you're galvanized into action. And so we decided we were going to do the live blood analysis. And the results were very, very, very interesting. You will see them later in the... And the experiment was, you will read it, but I just want to describe it in a minute. And what we did was we took 3 samples, blood samples, one at a time. So the first blood sample is just a little drop which is taken, and then it's put under a microscope, and you can see what is happening to the blood in real time in video. And then the second sample was actually as a result of a question that somebody asked me. He said, how do you know that if we drank just ordinary water, this wouldn't happen? So that was a very valid question, which I hadn't thought of. And so the second step was that the person would drink a small dose of ordinary water. And the second sample would be taken 12 minutes later. Where did I get the 12 minutes from? I got it from one of the videos on YouTube where there was this test done. So I thought, let's do the same thing. Let's see what happens in 12 minutes after drinking the tap water. So that was the second step. And the third step was to dip the RTLFs in the water for 2 minutes and then take another sample of the blood 12 minutes later. And the results were stunning. But the interesting thing was, which I should have known, but I didn't, was that the tap water was actually either neutral or non-beneficial. And all of us, 99% of people drink from the ordinary tap water. It's just called bulk water. They call it bulk water and structured water. There are 2 different names now. So there's something called bulk water, which is the ordinary water, and then there is something called structured water, which we will explore in some detail. So the tap water was non-beneficial. Go on. So the results of the images and the live blood analysis made us decide that we would have a new frequency, because we'd combine it, not two frequencies, but just one, and then we added one more frequency, which is the frequency of silver. So these are the key questions. What is structured water? What destroys the structure of water? What can we do about this? But as Mayor said, this is Mayor's thing. First, we need to ask, what do we really know about water? And one thing we do know is that it is not just H2O. Yours.
So this is just a little snapshot of why water is such an unusual and interesting substance. It's we often think, oh, water is H2O and the hydrogen bonds and the oxygen bonds, and but actually it has several very unusual and what are called anomalous properties, meaning that it behaves differently to what might be expected from what's known in the world of physics and chemistry. And when I looked up the thing, there was one list that had like 42 different anomalous properties of water, some of which were like highly technical. But just taking out, just a couple of them. For instance, with its atomic structure, which is H2O, actually at room temperature, water should be a gas, but it's not, it's a liquid. Another thing that's unusual about it is that mostly we know that actually the solid form of a substance is more dense than the liquid or gaseous form. And yet with water, the solid form is actually less dense. I mean, we all know that ice floats on water. And water is actually densest at 4 degrees centigrade, which is really, and that has huge implications in ecology for wildlife. I mean, can you imagine if ice formed at the bottom of the oceans rather than at the top, what that might mean for marine life? And another thing that came out from the research was X-ray diffraction. I thought this was really interesting. X-ray diffraction shows an unusually detailed structure. Why is this important, all these anomalous qualities? Is because water is actually everywhere. It's in everything. It's the basis of all life on Earth. And yet, what we don't know about it far exceeds anything that we do know. Like the quote from Isaac Newton at the beginning, what we know is a drop, what we don't know is an ocean. That's an order of many magnitudes. And in fact, when we were looking through the information, one of the researchers who was doing research into water said, well, every time we ask a question and we find, rather than finding an answer, we find that there are more questions thrown up. So that's the amazing thing about water. So some of these anomalous qualities, so water carries information and it has memory. So it carries the information of all the substances that have been dissolved in it, but are no longer in it. So even if we take them out through filtration or various other methods, the vibrational signature of that substance that's been dissolved in the water is still present. It is still active. And and actually, most of us know about, all of us I'm sure know about homeopathy. And the basis, one of the bases for homeopathy working is that water carries memory. And this has been poo-pooed throughout, the sort of traditional scientific establishment as being implausible and impossible. And yet, the research that shows that it's not possible is out of date. We didn't have the right technology to know the correct information. With modern technology now, and there are a whole list of different technologies that researchers are using now, with lots of different names that I can't remember at this point in time. They have shown very conclusively and definitively that, in fact, what we call ultra-high dilutions, meaning that there is no molecule of chemical substance in that water, that these ultra-high dilutions actually are biologically active. So they've done tests where they've put a biologically active substance in the water and then diluted it down so far that there can be no molecule of that left, and yet those ultra-high dilutions, when tested, have biological activity. So we know that this is true, and we know that it's actually the modern research, up-to-date research, is showing very conclusively that this is a very real phenomenon. Biometrics is the forerunner of the supercoherence system, and several of you are familiar with it, some of you are not. But we used to do a very special form of imaging called VRIC, which stands for Visual Reference of Image Coherence. And that enabled us to see a different reality under very special conditions, but with a normal Polaroid camera. So the Biometrics toolkit, that's a bit of a tongue twister, consisted of these vibrational
Vials.
yeah, these vials of basically of water that was not just normal water, but it was negatively charged, it had special properties, and then using that as a carrier, there were something like 160 odd different frequencies which carried no chemical substance, but which carried the energy signature of different substances. Can you go on to the next one? So you can see here, this was part of the Biometrics toolkit.
We did that for 20.
And
since
yeah,
95.
yeah, and that was work that went on from 95 until a few years ago. And each of those tubes carries a different energy signature. And here you can see the effects through VRIC imaging of the difference between that picture and that picture. The only difference is one little tube of water that, if you took it to the laboratory and tested it for its chemical composition, would show nothing but water. But I don't think anybody can doubt the effects that it's having on the bioenergy light field of the person.
And the person's just holding it.
Yeah, so this is not even ingesting it, this is just holding it, in which, you know, it's showing that's a field effect. And just for anybody who hasn't read Mum's books and stuff, this is not camera shake, by the way. So I think we've gone past that stage, most of us. Right. So another interesting phenomenon of water is that it has intelligence and consciousness. I would describe it like that. Is there anybody who hasn't seen Masaru Emoto's work? Okay, so Masaru Emoto, he's no longer with us, but his work continues. He did some, you will see actually in the slides later on, but basically they took water, either tap water or water that had been prayed over or had had some words said to it, and they froze this water and then looked at the ice crystals under high magnification. And the water crystals changed depending on what information the water had been subjected to. You will see some of these later, and they are very striking. And it shows that actually how we dialogue with the water has a very real effect. So the next one. Here we are.
I hope to show people through my research that water has a memory of its own.
Dr. Emoto's laboratory does research on water samples, which are subjected to various forms of outside influence. The impressions made upon the water are recorded by swiftly freezing it in a cryogenic chamber. Somebody said thank you to this water. Excuse me. You disgust me.
So just before we go on to this, you can see the very real effect on the structure of the ice crystal just by the power of words. Words are so important, whether they're spoken, whether they are thought, whether they are written down. Our intention is the wave that carries it, and it has a very real effect on, well, actually considering that we're all pretty much water, on everything and everybody. So what do we actually mean when we say the structure of water? Because actually water is a liquid, and yes, it has oxygen and 2 hydrogens, which are supposed to be at a fixed angle, but they're not, but that's another story. So what we mean by the structure of water is this. So this is a quote from Professor Rustam Roy, who is sadly no longer on this planet, in physical form anyway. And he's a very peppery chap and did some very amazing research. He's a physicist and a leading material scientist. And if you get a chance to see any of his stuff, there's plenty on YouTube. Please do so. It's very amazing. So he describes the structure of water as it is the arrangement in 3 dimensions of the building blocks, not the description of the building blocks. So if you like, the building blocks, i.e. H2O, are the bricks, and the structure of water is like the house that the bricks built. So you can see, anybody can take a pile of bricks, can just be a massive pile of rubble, or it can be an incredible mansion. It depends on the structure. So that's what the structure of water means. But what does the term structured water actually mean? And there might be others. So what we're sharing with you today is our understanding from the work that we've done. So we would describe it as water that has been reminded of its original nature. And usually for that to happen, it needs to have been through some process which makes it different to ordinary, or what's termed bulk water. And as a consequence, it actually has very different properties than ordinary water. And there are many different ways of structuring water. It's not this way or that way. There are many, many different ways. And as a consequence of this, there are many different types of structured water. And they're all different. And probably they address many different facets. We are infinitely complex beings. So, and again, to quote Professor Rustam Roy, so how many kinds of liquid water are there? The answer is very, very many. Undoubtedly infinite. Undoubtedly infinite. How long do these structures last? Some in our laboratories, hours and hours, and others days and even months. So it's a bit like every human being on the planet has their own unique energy signature, their own unique makeup. And how many different types of humans are there? Infinite numbers, who knows? At the moment, 7 billion or whatever, but there's... And now this is a really, really important point to understand, to get. This is probably the crux of everything. Why is structure so important? And it is because it's the structure that determines properties and not the chemical composition. And a lovely example of this in nature is the different faces of carbon. So we all know what diamonds look like. We all know what graphite looks like and acts like. Diamond is one of the hardest materials on the planet. And graphite is incredibly soft. It's what we use in our lead pencils. And yet they are both different forms of carbon. So it's the same atom, but the different structure results in completely different properties. The difference between this and structured water is that here you can see the difference between diamonds and graphite. With structured water, you need special processes or methodologies to be able to see the difference. And we're going to be seeing some of those a bit later. So, what destroys the structure of water? So unfortunately, this is going to be the gloom and doom scenario, which is actually quite unpleasant, but it's really necessary because for us to be aware of what's really out there is so important. It's only by knowing and understanding things that we can actually change them and make different choices. When we have information and understanding and knowledge, we have choice. So these are just some of the bullet points that we came up with in terms of what causes water to become destructured. And I thought it was really interesting that the word destructured, it's like the first few letters are destruct. So it's literally damaged. Next one, please. And the next one. So physical and chemical pollution we all know about those in the ecosystem, chemicals, plastics, drugs. You know, these are big problems. Carry on. I mean, here's 1 million plastic drinking bottles are purchased every minute. Every minute. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and nowadays, can we actually find drinking water in glass bottle? It's harder and harder. So if you choose not to drink tap water, which a lot of us don't want to do, then our choice is being more and more curtailed. So next. And we all know that, well, lots of us have been made aware of the fact that actually a lot of marine life, including birds, whales, other sea mammals and fish, they all have been found, some of them have been found with horrific amounts of plastic in their stomachs that they have ingested. Sometimes it even kills these creatures, very sadly. And what's also known, but perhaps less widely so, is that actually some of these plastics get into the actual tissues of these creatures. And then, of course, they are perpetuated through the food chain. And as humans who are kind of around the top of the food chain, guess who's going to get most of the effects? It's us. So, next, please. This is a study that Thrity found, which was actually carried out in 2005, so that's 13 years ago now. And it's really concerning because they tested sediment from 83 European lakes, which were high up in the mountains, really remote from any settlements and things like that. And in 60 out of these 83 lakes, they found estrogenic activity. And now there are chemicals that have estrogenic activity in nature, but these were chemicals that had been found that were of what they call anthropogenic origin, so they are man-made. In the remote lakes. So ask yourself, if that's going on in the remote lakes, what is going on in our cities? It's a concern, a very great concern. And the authors concluded this: these data reveal significant amounts of estrogenic compounds in remote lakes, relate them to overall human activity, and suggests that they may affect organisms inhabiting these ecosystems. Next, please. So what if they've got estrogenic activity? Big deal, right? But this estrogenic activity has enormous implications. Sorry, I coughed there. Has enormous implications on our biological well-being, not just of humans, but of marine life. Alligators have been found to have all sorts of distortions in their physiology, in their reproduction, and all sorts of things. Fish have been found to have both male and female characteristics. It's chilling. There are something like 85,000 chemicals on the planet right now that are man-made. Not all of them have estrogenic activity, but there is growing concern because we don't actually know which ones of them are what are called endocrine disruptors, and which ones are not. Certainly a couple of thousand are known to be endocrine disruptors. And by that, what we mean is our endocrine system is basically very important in terms of how our bodies function biologically, biochemically, physiologically. And these endocrine disruptors are any non-natural chemical that has an effect on the endocrine system. And they work. I mean, basically what they do is they mimic some of our natural hormones, and they block the receptors on the cells, so our natural hormones can't do their job. So you can imagine that people's biochemistry and physiology is really affected by this. Not just people, I mean any creatures. So if you want to know more information about this, you can certainly, there's some links we can give you that we're happy to share with you. Yeah, and there's so much concern now amongst certain organizations that actually the Endocrine Society and IPEN, I don't know what IPEN stands for, I couldn't actually find it, but it's a global network of about 700 NGOs that are working towards creating a safer, less toxic chemical environment for our planet. The sad thing is, this is having a real effect on babies and children. And even in utero, babies are receiving these endocrine disruptors through placental transfer and stuff. So, IPEN actually was formed in Sweden, for those of you who are from Sweden. Okay. So then there's electromagnetic pollution. Microwaves, mobile phones, we all have them, don't we? And some of us are very attached to our mobile phones. They've become a way of life. I mean, it's very hard actually to live without them. And EMF stuff is not going away anytime soon, but it behoves us to know what effects it's actually having on us and our water. So you just click on it.
This is what water heated in a microwave oven looks like. This is the effect of a mobile telephone.
It doesn't look anything like the water crystal that had "thank you" said to it, does it?
And that's this is happening to your inner water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so brace yourselves for this one, because it is really a bit... but it's so important, because this is what is actually going on our planet right now.
Everybody knows very well what radioactive radiation can cause. But it turns out that there are other, even more awesome effects. Rather more horrific is the change in the structure of water covering huge areas thousands of kilometers larger than the nuclear weapons testing grounds. It makes no difference where the test was carried out, in the atmosphere, on the ground, or underground. Colossal changes occur in the water, and the water's memory changes. And people drink that water, animals drink it, and suddenly terrible changes take place. When the explosion occurs, waves are formed which die out fairly quickly in the ground, but the water may continue to fluctuate for another 30 days. Swinging like a pendulum, the waves create a new and pathological ordering in the water. It has been noted that the number of suicides rises abruptly after such tests. By a factor of 2, 2.5, and 3. Medical experts had absolutely no explanation for this. But we could understand it. We showed the brain is made of water, about 85%. So these changes take place in the brain, and a conflict between the water structures arises. The bioplasm of the brain is disrupted. And the result is that the person is deprived even of such an extremely important incentive as the drive to live.
That's really concerning, isn't it? I mean, we're not talking about the effects just being there for a short while. We're talking about 30 days, potentially, and thousands of miles. We're not just talking locally. And you made a comment, didn't you, Mum, about how they've noticed that there's an increase in the suicide rates of young people in Korea. And, you know, who knows whether there's some link between all the various testings that have gone on there and whether that has some impact on what's going on for these young people. It's everything that's out there, that's happening to the water out there, is also happening to every single one of us, because we are at least 70% water.
And we are connected.
And yeah, we are all connected. So this is this is about radioactive waste. Out of sight, out of mind, but not out of the field. Not out of the ecosystem. Here, along the US Atlantic coast are buried 90,000 containers of radioactive waste with 100 kilocuries. I don't really know what these
The special measurements.
measurements are, but they're a lot. And the European part has 500 kilocuries. And then, of course, there's the effects of things like the, Fukushima, many years ago, Chernobyl, all these nuclear reactors that we have. So, and of course, now there's also a concern about the disposal of other materials that we kind of dump things in the ocean. It's like, that's our water. That's the part of planet Earth. It's like you cannot just pretend it's not there just because you can't see it. This is an interesting one as well. So we've already seen how different words and thoughts have an effect on the water crystals that you saw with Masaru Emoto's work. And we know that vibrational signatures of substance that have previously been dissolved in the water has an effect. In the VRIC, in the bioluminetic system, you saw the beneficial effects of that. So it's not that it's good or bad, because everything leaves its energy signature. The question is, what is that energy signature that is being left? And how is it impacting our complex systems and the complex systems of all other beings and creatures on this planet?
Und unsere geistige Verschmutzung, die wir dem Wasser geben.
We pollute water spiritually, and this happens on a huge scale. Why? The water adopts all of the hatred, all of the malice, the stress. The water is almost dead by the time it enters our body.
Ist schon fast tot, wenn es bei uns ankommt.
It's not a very uplifting message, is it? Yeah. And part of what he's talking about is also the physical processes that damage the structure. So, for instance, in cities and even in more remote areas, our water comes a long, long way through pipes. A lot of them have angles in them, and all these things, and they're pumped at high pressure. The water is pumped at high pressure. So all these things have an effect on the water.
Water makes a long and difficult journey before arriving in our homes.
Früher war es so, dass nur eine
It used to be common knowledge that a settlement could only occur where there was a natural source of water. Today, whether or not there is water in a place is of no importance, because we transport water for thousands of miles using high pressure.
kilometerlange Rohre.
In nature, rivers and streams always flow along a smoothly curving course. But any water supply system has multiple right-angle turns. The natural structure of the water breaks down more and more with each such turn.
Water from a water supply system which flows into our homes through pipes has various forms, crystals of various forms, but they are all deformed. That is, it may look like this. It can look like this or have these crystals in many other arrangements, but you won't see any symmetry or beauty.
It is well known that the water supply in many large cities is a closed-loop system. After undergoing aggressive chemical purification and passing through powerful filters, the water in these systems is returned to our homes, still remembering the chemicals and the violence it was subjected to. Even stronger, however, is the informational pollution that the water accumulates as it flows down miles of long pipes through thousands and thousands of houses and apartments.
So on the one hand, obviously, you know, when we're living in cities, there are so many people on the planet, and et cetera, it is necessary for us to have water purification plants and for things to be filtered out and chemicals to be added to make it actually safe or drinkable. And yet, looking at these processes and seeing what tap water, you've seen the Spagyric image of the tap water that was really very heavily calcified and lacked any beauty in it. And you saw the crystals just now that Leonid Izvikov had of the quite deformed water crystals formed from tap water. So is it safe? Is it actually safe? Is it, you know, at one level, yes, it is. You know, it stops us from getting nasty illnesses that kill lots of people on the planet still. We all know the effects of not having water that has not been purified in that way. So it's not that we shouldn't do that. The question is, what else do we need to do? There has to be something else. And this is a very moving bit from a video that is a message from Professor Eshel Ben Yaakov, who died very suddenly. Nobody really knows why. And he's done a lot of work with bacteria and the intelligence in bacteria. And this is a message from him about the vulnerability of water, really, related to its ability to carry information and the implications of that.
As Eshel Ben Yaakov warns, water is quite vulnerable.
If this is the case, as I mentioned before, we have to rethink the way that we treat our water.
In any case, one has to be extremely careful in dealing with water.
If water indeed has memory, the fact that we are so uncareful about the treatment of water can cause the water that we have to eventually to become non-suitable or stressful to organic systems. I don't want to sound as someone who brings a message now of a disaster, but it can happen. They will not be poisonous, they will not have some minerals that are not within the regulations, but they will be undrinkable in the sense that drinking this water will cause us some damage or will weaken our system as a whole. And more important is that if we treat the water this way, the bacteria that we cannot live without might go through dramatic changes and will not be able to function in supporting the environment that we see around.
Yeah. So these bacteria are part of our microbiome. You know, our gut contains trillions of bacteria, without which none of us would be standing here. And they are a very essential part of our immune system, amongst other things. So having his work, as I said, was primarily with bacteria and the intelligence that resides within them. So that's a very important message for all of us to hear. And this is the first live blood analysis which was done with the SRTLFs.
This is Roy Watkins at the Ulverston Natural Health Centre conducting an experiment on the effects of coherent structured water on live blood using phase contrast microscopy. The water is structured by using the supercoherence frequencies. Here we have a microscope which is examining a sample of live blood at high magnification, 100 times. Structured Water Experiment Part 1. First Test Subject. Here we can see a sample of blood from a client who has very bad rouleau. And this is taken before they have drunk any water. All the blood cells are stuck together, so oxygen transport is severely compromised. Rouleau is a French word meaning rolls and means strings of overlapping red blood cells in live blood analysis. This can indicate a digestive imbalance, irritable bowel syndrome, food sensitivities, and many other digestive problems. In a moment, I'm going to ask them to drink a glass of ordinary tap water. Then we will wait 12 minutes and take a second blood sample and see if there are any changes. These are the supercoherence frequencies. Now I am putting the supercoherence frequencies in the water for 2 minutes. After the client drinks this water, we will take a third blood sample and again after 12 minutes to see if there is any difference. 12 minutes after a glass of ordinary tap water, you can see the effects of rehydration. This is the sample taken 12 minutes after the person has drunk the structured water. There is a huge difference after just half a glass of structured water. I'm really surprised. In my experience, this is unlikely to be due only to the effects of rehydration. Here is another client with much healthier looking blood than the previous person. There is some stickiness rather than severe rouleau, and the red blood cells are looking weak and therefore easily damaged. 12 minutes after drinking ordinary chlorinated tap water, you can see the effect on a healthy person. Yes, definitely looking much improved after drinking the structured water, repairing the effects of drinking tap water, and reducing stickiness seen in the original sample. Part 3, third test subject. This is the first blood sample before drinking any water. Here we are seeing rouleau cutting down the oxygen transport, and so the individual has low energy. After drinking tap water, the tap water seems to have weakened all the blood cells, so they are easily damaged. A definite improvement with the structured water. Part 4, fourth test subject. Here we have the initial slide of blood that is very sticky and in poor condition. So let us see what the effect of tap water and structured water have on this blood sample. No significant change with tap water on this sample. After drinking structured water, we've got a significant looking improvement. There is much less stickiness and the cells are a healthier shape. Part 5, fifth test subject. Here we can see a client's blood which is in very poor condition indeed. After drinking tap water, there is no real change. After tap water, there is still a lot of rouleau formation and the cells appear weak. Once again, there is a definite improvement after drinking structured water. There is still some stickiness and clumping, but not severe rouleau formation, and the cells have a healthier shape. So my conclusion is that with live blood analysis, you can demonstrate that ordinary drinking water, structured with supercoherence frequencies, improves the quality of the blood, and that tap water either has a neutral effect or can actually cause further problems in the blood.
So what do you think about this, looking at the live blood analysis? Are we seeing Eshel van Yakov's warning coming true? It's like, yeah, it doesn't have poisons in it in physical form or chemical form. But you saw in two of the slides. Well, one particularly, that actually the tap water caused the fairly healthy looking cells to become more sticky and clumped together. So it's a concern. And here's a question. What do you think?